Have you ever paused long enough to wonder if the life you live is truly yours, or if it's a carefully rehearsed performance written by someone else? From the moment we are born, society hands us scripts: what to believe, how to behave, and what success should look like. Yet, deep down, there's a silent awareness, a whisper that something essential has been forgotten. Alan Watts often spoke of this illusion, this grand play of human existence where most mistake the mask for the face. He invited us to look closer, to question whether the person we've become is an authentic expression of our being or merely a reflection of the world's expectations. Imagine, for a moment, waking up one day and realizing that everything you've pursued, status, wealth, recognition, was part of a ritual designed not to liberate you, but to bind you. Society calls it progress, but Watts called it a magnificent misunderstanding. He saw that the chase for meaning through external validation only deepens our sense of separation. Like actors lost in their roles, we begin to believe the act is real. But what if, as Watts suggested, freedom doesn't come from rejecting society, but from seeing through its illusion? What if the key is not to escape the stage, but to awaken while still standing upon it? These rituals, the morning rush, the polite conversations, the endless pursuit of more, are not inherently wrong. They are, in fact, invitations. Hidden beneath their surface lies a profound opportunity to rediscover our natural rhythm, the one that exists before thought, before comparison. Watts often reminded us that we're not drops of water separated from the ocean. We're the ocean itself, momentarily pretending to be a drop. The illusion is not the world, but our belief that we are apart from it. In every ceremony, every tradition, every goal society sets, there is a subtle message: do this, and you will be complete. But as Watts gently exposed, completion is an illusion born of fear. You are already whole, already enough. The rituals that truly free us are not those performed for others' approval, but those that dissolve the boundaries between the self and the universe. They are moments of presence, where we stop chasing and begin seeing. So, as we step into this reflection together, let us not seek escape from the world, but awakening within it. Let us question not to rebel, but to remember, because, as Alan Watts once said, you are something the whole universe is doing. And perhaps, freedom begins the moment you stop trying to become something, and simply allow yourself to be. Most people live as if they are trapped inside a dream they never chose. From the moment they open their eyes in the morning, they begin to perform the rituals of waking, working, striving, and proving. Yet few ever pause long enough to ask why. Alan Watts believed that this question, this simple why, is the beginning of awakening. For him, life was not meant to be endured or conquered, but experienced as a dance. Society, he said, has taught us to treat life as a journey toward a destination, a test we must pass, or a race we must win. But what if life is not a journey at all? What if it is music, meant to be played, not hurried toward the final note? Watts often describes society as a magnificent stage, one filled with masks and rituals that convince us to forget who we are. We bow to authority, chase ambition, and perform our parts so perfectly that we begin to mistake the act for the actor. In this illusion, we become someone, a role built from names, labels, and identities, but lose sight of the deeper presence behind them. It is this someone that struggles, compares, fears, and desires endlessly. The real self, the silent observer behind the mask, remains untouched by all of it. Watts would say that freedom is not found by rejecting these roles, but by realizing that you are never truly them. The tragedy of modern life, Watts argued, is that we've confused the symbol for the reality. Money, success, reputation, these are symbols, yet we worship them as if they were sacred truths. He compared it to mistaking a menu for the meal. You cannot eat the paper, no matter how deliciously the words describe the food. And still, people spend entire lives chasing menus, forgetting to taste the meal of life itself. When you see through this illusion, everything changes. The world doesn't lose its meaning. Rather, it gains a deeper, richer texture. The ordinary becomes extraordinary because you are no longer blinded by the pursuit of control. He often reminded his listeners that trying to control life is like trying to hold water in your hands. The tighter you grasp, the faster it slips away. This is the paradox of control. The more you seek it, the less you have. True freedom, Watts said, arises when you allow life to flow through you instead of constantly fighting against it. To trust the current is not to surrender in weakness, but to recognize that the river knows where it's going. It's the ego that insists it must steer the course. When that illusion dissolves, peace enters effortlessly, like air returning to the lungs after a long hold. In this sense, the rituals that free us are not those written by society, but those performed by awareness itself. The ritual of breathing, of watching, of simply being. To sit quietly and witness your own mind is perhaps the most radical act in a world addicted to distraction. In that silence, the illusion begins to crack. You start to see that your worries are not chains, but clouds. They pass, and so do you. The performance loses its power when you stop believing you are the performance. What remains is something immeasurable, something Watts called the real you, the universe playing at being human. To see through the illusion of society does not mean to reject it. Alan Watts warned against turning enlightenment into yet another competition, another badge for the ego to wear. The ego, he said, is clever. It will even disguise itself as the spiritual self to survive. That is why true liberation cannot be forced or earned. It happens the moment you realize there was nothing to earn in the first place. The rituals that free you are not achievements. They are awakenings, moments when you suddenly see that you are never bound. You are dreaming of chains. Watts described the human condition as a game of hide-and-seek played by the universe with itself. We hide behind roles: father, daughter, artist, leader, believer, forgetting that beneath them all, we are the same consciousness exploring infinite forms. And like any good game, the hiding is part of the fun. Life's purpose is not to end the game, but to remember that it's a game. Once you see that, the seriousness dissolves. You laugh, not with cynicism, but with understanding. That laughter, that cosmic humor, is a sacred ritual in itself. It loosens the grip of fear and makes room for wonder. He often spoke of the futility of chasing permanence in an impermanent world. Every system, every empire, every belief eventually crumbles. Yet society teaches us to resist this truth, to cling to illusions of stability. Watts compared this resistance to fighting the rhythm of music. You cannot freeze a melody. The beauty exists precisely because it flows. When we try to hold on to people, possessions, or moments, we miss their song. To live freely is to dance to life's rhythm without demanding that the tune never change. In the heart of this acceptance lies the most misunderstood kind of freedom, the freedom to feel. Watts believed that to be fully human is to experience joy and sorrow, birth and decay, not as opposites, but as two movements of the same symphony. Modern society teaches avoidance. Escape sadness, deny aging, pursue eternal pleasure. But to deny one side of existence is to deny life itself. The rituals that free us are not those that promise eternal happiness, but those that teach us to embrace the fullness of being, to cry, to laugh, to breathe, to let go. Ultimately, Watts invites us to see that life is not a problem to be solved, but an experience to be lived. The illusion of society thrives on anxiety, the constant feeling that something is missing. But the truth he uncovered is both simple and profound. Nothing is missing. You are not a traveler moving toward wholeness. You are wholeness exploring movement. When that realization sinks in, the rituals of life, work, love, loss, art, transform. They no longer bind you. They reveal you. And in that revelation, you find what was never truly lost, the effortless joy of being alive. There comes a moment, if you're attentive enough, when you begin to notice that life moves effortlessly without your command. The heart beats on its own. The lungs breathe without your effort. Seasons change, stars move, rivers flow, and none of it requires control. Alan Watts urged us to see that we, too, belong to that rhythm. The illusion of separation makes us believe we are observers of life. But in truth, we are life, expressing itself as thought, motion, and awareness. When this realization dawns, every ritual, whether a morning coffee, a prayer, or the act of walking, becomes sacred because it's not you performing life, it's life performing you. What's often spoke about how society builds walls of fear around spontaneity. From childhood, we're taught to behave, to fit in, to plan. Yet, he insisted that freedom can never be found through rigid control. To be spontaneous is not to be careless. It's to be aligned with the natural intelligence of existence. The same intelligence that grows trees, forms galaxies, and shapes every wave also flows through us. When we stop forcing the world to match our expectations, we begin to sense that we were never apart from that intelligence. It was never out there. It was always here, pulsing beneath the skin of every moment. In a world obsessed with productivity, Watts offered a radical idea, that doing nothing could be the most profound act of all, not out of laziness, but out of deep trust. Society glorifies busyness as a virtue, as if constant movement could prove our worth. But in silence, in the pause between breaths, lies a truth that no achievement can touch. When you allow stillness, you are not withdrawing from life. You are returning to its source. That stillness is not empty. It's full, alive, vibrant. It's the space where the illusion dissolves and the real world begins to shine through. This return to awareness transforms how we experience everything. Even suffering changes its shape. Watts did not deny pain. He saw it as part of the sacred play of existence. He would say, "You cannot have an up without a down, or a front without a back." The dualities we resist, success and failure, joy and grief, are inseparable. The rituals that free us are not those that avoid pain, but those that teach us to hold it gently, to see it as a note in the symphony rather than a mistake in the melody. Life, when seen clearly, doesn't need to be perfect to be divine. And this is where the great paradox of freedom emerges. When you stop trying to escape the chaos, you find peace. When you stop searching for meaning, life becomes meaningful. The illusion of society is built upon endless striving, always becoming, never being. But the moment you pause and look deeply, you see what Watts saw, that you are never bound, never broken, never missing anything. You were simply dreaming of a world where you had to become what you already are. Alan Watts believed that awakening was less like climbing a mountain and more like remembering a song. You don't reach enlightenment through struggle. You remember it through surrender. The rituals of meditation, reflection, and awareness are not steps on a ladder. They are mirrors revealing what's already there. But society teaches us the opposite. It tells us to climb, to conquer, to collect. And so, we forget that what we seek is not above us or ahead of us. It is within us, quietly waiting to be seen. When you realize this, even ordinary moments become luminous because they no longer need to be more than what they are. He often compared human life to waves upon the ocean. Each wave appears separate, rising, falling, shaping itself. But every one is the ocean, expressing in a different form. We fear death, failure, and loss because we believe the wave ends when it crashes. But Watts reminded us, the wave never truly disappears. It returns to what it always was, the sea. The rituals that free us are those that dissolve this illusion of isolation. To live with awareness is to see that everything is interconnected, that every action ripples through the entire ocean of being. One of Watts's most profound insights was that anxiety is born from the attempt to separate yourself from life. The mind says, "I must control this, fix this, change this." Yet all the while, it's the same life energy fueling both the problem and the one trying to solve it. When you see this, you realize that the struggle itself is part of the play. The moment you stop fighting your own nature, harmony returns. The ritual here is simple but powerful: to breathe, to watch, to let go. In that letting go, you find that everything begins to align on its own. He warned, however, that seeing through the illusion is not about becoming detached or indifferent. True understanding brings compassion, not coldness. When you realize that everyone is playing the same game of forgetting and remembering, judgment fades. You begin to see the same spark of consciousness in every pair of eyes, every struggle, every laugh. Compassion is the most natural response when you awaken from the illusion of separation. It's not something to be practiced. It's what remains when you stop pretending to be someone else. And in that compassion, a new kind of ritual emerges, the ritual of being human with open awareness. Every conversation, every challenge, every fleeting moment becomes a ceremony of connection. What would say that the universe is not something happening to you? It's something happening through you. When you live from this knowing, you are not enslaved by the illusion of society. You participate in it consciously, joyfully, as a dancer aware of the rhythm, but no longer bound by the choreography. Alan Watts often described human life as a form of divine play, Lila, as it is called in Eastern philosophy. To him, existence was never a punishment or a test, but an act of cosmic creativity. The universe, he said, is not a machine grinding toward purpose. It is art unfolding in infinite forms. And like any great piece of art, its beauty lies in its spontaneity, in its unpredictability. Society, however, has trained us to fear uncertainty, to cling to order and control. We trade the raw wonder of being alive for the security of predictable roles. But Watts taught that to be fully alive is to embrace uncertainty, to see that chaos and order are two dancers moving as one. The ritual that frees us is the courage to let life surprise us again. He often laughed when speaking about how humans try to figure life out. We dissect, analyze, and define, as if by labeling the flower we could capture its fragrance. Watts would say, to define is to confine. The more we try to pin life down, the more it escapes our grasp. True understanding doesn't come from explanation. It comes from direct experience. When you touch the coolness of water, when you feel the wind against your skin, when you listen to music without naming it, you are participating in what Watts called the eternal now. The rituals that free us are not intellectual. They are experiential. They return us to the immediacy of existence, where every moment is sacred because it is alive. Modern society glorifies thinking, but Watts believed that thought should serve life, not dominate it. He compared the mind to a tool, an extraordinary servant, but a terrible master. The illusion begins when we start mistaking our thoughts for reality. We imagine ourselves as isolated thinkers, separate from the world we perceive. But the truth, he said, is that thought and reality are one continuous process. The mind is not you. It is something happening within you, like waves forming and dissolving on the surface of the ocean. The ritual of freedom, then, is not to silence the mind, but to watch it with awareness, to see that every thought arises and fades like sound in the vastness of silence. Watts also spoke about the paradox of identity. He would say, trying to define who you are is like trying to bite your own teeth. We spend years constructing identities, titles, careers, beliefs, yet none of them capture the essence of being. They are only masks, necessary for the play, but not to be mistaken for the actor. Society teaches us to polish these masks, to protect them at all costs. But the more we cling to who we think we are, the more we suffer when life changes. The rituals that free us are those that allow us to remove the mask, not to reject it, but to see it clearly as part of the dance. In the clarity of that seeing, something extraordinary happens. Life stops being something to survive and becomes something to celebrate. Every breath, every encounter, every sunrise becomes a reminder of the mysterious intelligence that animates all things. Watts invited us to live as if we were aware that this moment, this very one, is the point of it all. There is nowhere else to reach, nothing else to become. You are already the music you've been trying to find. In many of his talks, Alan Watts compared life to a game of pretending, the divine hide and seek. The universe, he said, hides itself in form, pretending to be you, me, and everything else, only to rediscover itself through our eyes. When you begin to sense this, an immense lightness enters your being. The seriousness that once ruled your life fades into humor. You see that even your mistakes, your fears, your longings are part of the play. Watts used to laugh as he spoke of people trying to be spiritual, as if there was something separate for being human. He would say, "You don't have to be anything but what you already are." The ritual of awakening is not about becoming holy. It's about realizing that the holiness was never missing. This perspective changes the way we relate to others. When you recognize that every person is a mask through which the universe speaks, judgment dissolves. The stranger, the rival, the lover, all are expressions of the same consciousness exploring itself through contrast. Let's believe that love is not something we do. It's what we are when we forget to pretend. The illusion of society thrives on division, on the idea of me in them. But the moment that illusion drops, compassion arises naturally. You no longer act kindly because it's moral. You act kindly because there is no real separation left to justify cruelty. Watts also explored the rhythm of life and death, seeing them not as opposites, but as two sides of the same coin. He would often remind his listeners that death is not the end, but a transformation, like a flame passing from one candle to another. Society fears death because it believes in permanence. It clings to continuity. But Watts saw death as the ultimate ritual of freedom, the return of the wave to the ocean. To live well, he said, is to die each moment, to let go continuously, to shed old identities, beliefs, and fears. In doing so, we make room for life to renew itself endlessly. He often said that the meaning of life is just to be alive. Yet this simplicity terrifies people. We've been trained to search for meaning as if it were hidden in some distant place, after success, after enlightenment, after recognition. But Watts laughed at that notion. Meaning is not found, it is experienced. Every sound, every heartbeat, every passing cloud is meaning, if only you're awake enough to see it. The rituals that free you are the ones that pull you back into the raw immediacy of now, the eternal present that never began and never ends. And so, the illusion of society begins to lose its hold. You see through its rituals not with anger or rebellion, but with amusement and understanding. You participate in the world, but you are no longer consumed by it. You play your role, but you remember that it's a role. And in that remembering, you rediscover what Watts spent his life pointing toward. That life is not a problem to solve or a trap to escape, but a cosmic performance of beauty, laughter, and infinite wonder. Alan Watts often said that one of the greatest illusions of modern life is the belief that happiness is something to be pursued. Society has built entire systems upon that chase. Advertising, education, careers, all whispering the same message. You will be happy when you achieve, when you earn, when you become. Yet, as Watts observed, chasing happiness is like trying to catch your own shadow. The more you run after it, the further it moves away. True happiness, he said, arises not from pursuit but from presence. It appears when you stop reaching and start noticing. The rituals that free us are those that teach us how to notice, how to inhabit the stillness where joy naturally resides. Watts believed that most human suffering is not caused by life itself, but by resistance to it. We fight the flow, insisting that reality must bend to our will. But the universe, in its infinite wisdom, does not fight back. It simply continues to be. He would often remind his listeners that life is not happening to you. It is happening through you. You are not a fragment observing existence from the outside. You are the very process of existence unfolding in human form. When this insight sinks in, resistance becomes absurd. You stop pushing against the river and begin to float with it. And in that effortless floating, life becomes profoundly simple, even in its complexities. There's a moment, Watts said, when awareness begins to turn inward, when you start to see the one who watches, the silent presence behind your thoughts. That is the beginning of true meditation, not as an act of control, but as an act of wonder. Meditation, for Watts, was not about escaping the world or achieving stillness. It was about realizing that stillness is already here, beneath every motion. When you sit quietly, you notice that life is meditating you, breathing you, thinking you, living you. The ritual here is not the technique. It's the recognition that there was never anyone separate who needed to do the meditation. Society often tells us that enlightenment is a distant summit reached by saints and sages. But what's turned that idea inside out? Enlightenment he said, is not a peak. It's a shift of perception. It's seeing the ordinary as divine, the mundane as miraculous. It's laughing when you realize that the one who sought awakening was never separate from the awakened state itself. The more we chase enlightenment, the further it seems. The moment we stop chasing, it reveals itself in everything. The laughter of a child, the sound of rain, the taste of tea. These are not small things. They are doorways to infinity disguised as moments. In the end, Watts's teachings were not instructions, but invitations, calls to rediscover what you already know deep within. The illusion of society can only bind those who believe its promises. But once you see through it, once you understand that you are never lacking, the game changes completely. You begin to play, not to win, but to dance. You begin to live, not to arrive, but to awaken again and again in each breath. Alan Watts often said that awakening is not about gaining something new, but about losing what was never real. When the masks fall away, when the noise of society fades, what remains is silence. And in that silence, you discover yourself not as a name, not as a story, but as awareness itself. This awareness has no edges, no beginning, and no end. It watches the rise and fall of worlds without attachment, yet it is intimately present in everything. Watts called this the great paradox of being, that you are both the dancer and the dance, both the drop and the ocean. The rituals that free you are those that return you to this knowing, not as an idea, but as a living truth. He often warned that the moment you think you've understood life, you've missed it. Reality cannot be captured by words or beliefs. It can only be lived. The mind wants certainty, but life thrives in mystery. Watts celebrated that mystery. He urged us not to explain the stars, but to gaze at them, not to define love, but to feel it, not to seek the divine in temples, but to see it in the eyes of every living being. The illusion of society teaches that knowledge is power, but wisdom, true wisdom, is the humility to admit that you don't know. And in that unknowing, you finally meet life as it is, not as you wish it to be. He believed that liberation was not the end of the human story, but the beginning of a deeper playfulness. Once you awaken, you still live, laugh, love, work, but with lightness. You are no longer trapped in the narrative of success or failure. You move through the world with grace, because you know it's all part of the great performance. Watts called this state the divine comedy, a life lived fully, consciously, joyfully aware of its own impermanence. And yet, in that impermanence, you feel something eternal. The play continues, but now you're smiling. Perhaps the greatest ritual of all, Watts said, is acceptance, the willingness to let everything be as it is. To accept does not mean to be passive. It means to flow with intelligence. When you stop resisting the dance, you move in harmony with it. You still act, create, and care, but without the burden of control. You live as the ocean moves, spontaneously, without effort, without fear. That is true freedom, to act without anxiety, to love without possession, to exist without needing to justify your existence. And so, the illusion of society dissolves, not through destruction, but through understanding. You awaken not by escaping the world, but by seeing it clearly for what it is, a magnificent dream through which consciousness learns to know itself. The rituals that free you are the simplest of all, to breathe, to listen, to feel, to be. And in that sacred simplicity, you realize what Alan Watts devoted his life to revealing, that you are not a stranger in the universe. You are the universe, momentarily remembering its own beauty through the miracle of being human. And now, as the echoes of Watts's wisdom settle into silence, one truth stands luminous above the rest. You were never lost. The rituals of society, its demands, its judgments, its noise, were never meant to imprison you, only to awaken you through contrast. Every expectation you carried, every fear that shaped your choices, was part of the grand illusion that you were separate from life itself. Yet, beneath all those layers of pretending, something eternal has always watched, patiently, quietly, lovingly, waiting for you to remember. Freedom, as Watts taught, is not rebellion against the world. It is the graceful recognition that the world and you are not two. The walls that once confined you dissolve the moment you realize you built them yourself. You stop fighting shadows and start dancing with light. The rituals that once felt like chains now become doorways, each one inviting you to return, to presence, to laughter, to the simplicity of being alive. What once seemed like chaos begins to feel like rhythm, and what once felt meaningless becomes profoundly sacred. He reminded us that enlightenment does not change what you see, it changes the one who sees. The world remains the same, but your eyes begin to soften. You no longer seek control, you begin to trust. You no longer chase meaning, you start to feel it in the ordinary pulse of existence. When the illusion fades, what remains is not emptiness, but a deep sense of belonging, to the wind, to the stars, to every heartbeat that has ever echoed across the universe. You realize that the entire cosmos has been whispering one message all along: you are home. So, as this reflection draws to a close, let these words linger in your mind, not as lessons to memorize, but as mirrors to return to. The next time you feel the weight of expectation or the pressure to be someone, pause. Breathe. Remember that you're not the mask, but the consciousness wearing it. The world may continue its play of illusions, but you, awakened, can finally laugh, not out of mockery, but out of pure recognition. For you have seen through the dream and found yourself at the heart of it. And if these words resonated with you, if they stirred something quiet yet undeniable within, stay connected to this journey. Subscribe, share your thoughts below, and join others who are remembering what it truly means to be free. Not free from the world, but free within it. Because, as Alan Watts would say, you are the universe playing hide and seek with itself, and it's time you stopped hiding.